Gosh, here we are again. Week 2 in isolation. Again, I wish you were here. I wish we could all be together. Prudence and I were in the church a few days ago, and she goes in, as you know, before each Mass to greet the people. She was stunned to see that there was no one there, and was really pretty hurt by it. So it's affected her life too, as it has affected all of our lives. But as we find ways to connect, we will do the best we can to connect with you. So today we will look at the readings for the 5th Sunday in Lent. I'll do the Gospel. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Now a man was ill, Lazarus from Bethany, the village of Mary and his sister Martha. Mary was the one who had anointed the Lord with perfumed oil and dried his feet with her hair. It was her brother Lazarus who was ill. So the sisters sent word to Jesus saying, Master, the one you love is ill. When Jesus heard this, he said, This illness is not to end in death, but is for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was ill, he remained for 2 days in the place where he was. Then after this he said to his disciples, Let us go back to Judea. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just trying to stone you, and you want to go back there. Jesus answered, Are there not 12 days, 12 hours in a day? If one walks during the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if one walks at night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him. He said this, and then he said to them, Our friend Lazarus is asleep, but I am going to awaken him. So the disciples said to him, Master, if he is asleep, he will be saved. But Jesus was talking about his death, while they thought that he meant ordinary sleep. So then Jesus said to them clearly, Lazarus has died, and I am glad for you that I was not there, that you may believe. Let us go to him. So Thomas, called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, Let us also go to die with him. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, only about 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary sat at home. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, Your brother will rise. Martha said to him, I know he will rise in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus told her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, even if he dies, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, Yes, Lord. I have come to believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, the one who is coming into the world. When she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary secretly, saying, The teacher is here and is asking for you. As soon as she heard this, she rose quickly and went to him. For Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still where Martha had met him. So when the Jews who were with her in the house comforting her saw Mary get up quickly and go out, they followed her, presuming that she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her weeping, he became perturbed and deeply troubled, and said, Where have you laid him? They said to him, Sir, come and see. And Jesus wept. So the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, how could not the one who opened the eyes of the blind man have done something so that this man would not have died? So Jesus, perturbed again, came to the tomb. There was a cave and a stone lay across it. Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the dead man's sister, said to him, Lord, by now there will be a stench. He has been dead for 4 days. Jesus said to her, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. And Jesus raised his eyes and said, Father, I thank you for hearing me. I know that you always hear me. But because of the crowd here, I have said this, that they may believe that you sent me. And when he had said this, he cried out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, tied hand and foot with burial bands, and his face was wrapped in a cloth. So Jesus said to them, untie him and let him go. Now many of the Jews who had come to Mary and seen what he had done began to believe in him. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. I'm struck. We hear this every year, and it's always a challenge to hear new things. But they're always there. These are dense readings. I'm struck by the parallels between this story and what is about to happen to Jesus. Sort of a confrontation with death, a refusal to bypass it. In this case, Lazarus. Jesus is not going to keep him from dying. Later, it'll be Jesus not keeping himself from dying. Tremendous unbelief and confusion and doubt about what's going on among the disciples. And then this sign and this resurrection. And biblical commentators will call this the end of the book of signs in John and the beginning of the book of glory. But as a final sign, this is pretty obvious, it seems.
That it's the parallel with the
story. That if this is the last thing that the disciples see before they go to Jerusalem.
What do you make of, you speak about the similarities, what do you make of the fact that Lazarus is dead 4 days and Jesus is only dead 3? Is there something to that's of any
I don't know.
So, I think like 3 days and 4 days, like 4 days for Lazarus is like for sure that he already died.
Yeah.
It's not like pretend that he died, but like 4 days surely. Even his sister said like he's gonna stay.
Yeah, right. It's all dead.
So it's like already dead, like
right.
dead.
Right.
and like 2 days, it can be that too. Like So 3 days that already.
And the reason I ask is because generally, often when the parallels to Jesus, to his death and resurrection, they will use the 3 days, like Jonah in the well for 3 days, and someone else is, someplace else for 3 days, and but then in this case, it's 4 days. And as you said, maybe to make sure that the guy he is surely dead, not just a little dead, but he's totally dead.
And then that too, like you mentioned, like the sign, the book of sign, and this is the final one that compared to the resurrection of Jesus. And when Jesus resurrected, he had to go through all this like struggle into like they need someone to open the stone from the outside, and he needs someone to untie him. But Jesus on the resurrection day
doesn't need any of that,
doesn't need any of it, because he transformed into the new glorious body, and Lazarus just be alive. Not he will die again, right soul want to make sure that he died again. But however, the profession of Martha, we all will live again, transform body as Jesus. So this is like the ordinary that to show the glory of God, so that people may believe in Him.
And it's another case too in the Gospels where a person who makes a profession of faith, as Martha does, doesn't really know what she's saying.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Peter does it on occasion, and some of the others do it. And you know, I have come to believe that you are, the Messiah, the one who is coming to the world, you know. And then she's the one too in the Gospel who, as soon as he says, then roll back the stone, and she says, "Oh no, don't do that." Right. Whatever your powers may be, this man is dead. He's not blind. He's not crippled. He's not lame. He's dead, and he stinks. And while you could have perhaps given her understanding of Messiah, her limited understanding, maybe you could have done something for him before this happened. If you had been here, this would not have happened. You can't do anything for this guy. And I've often wondered if that's not why he weeps. You know, I mean, the order of the words suggests that he's weeping because everyone else is weeping, and because generally he's been overcome by the mourning, the emotions of a crowd. But when she says, when it's clear to her that even a good friend of his doesn't understand who he is, even after making this statement of this profession of faith, I wonder if that doesn't kind of say, oh my gosh, and this is the last son. I mean, they've seen these incredible things, a man born blind, a woman given faith, and all kinds of other things, and here we are at the end, and she still doesn't really understand who I am, that even this has no power over me, death, that I have power over death, and
and even like that he wept after Mary said that, and Mary, and we know like the one that sit next to him and like meditate on his word most of the time, and now she said it. If you have been here, my brother has not been died, and now she wept. He wept.
Right. They're all weeping. A lot of weeping
Everybody's crying, wailing.
So that then is one of my favorite parts, as I was saying earlier, before we even started this video. Because it points to, I think, kind of an issue that arises often in life. Both Martha and Mary say when Jesus arrives, if you had been here, this would not have happened. Often when I have funeral liturgies, and the funeral is particularly emotive because of a young person or something, and you can see in the eyes of those who are suffering this sense that if God were around, this kind of thing wouldn't happen. Young people wouldn't die. This person who I had prayed for so long would not have died. God would answer prayers. And so the logical conclusion is that God isn't around. Because if God were around, this wouldn't happen. This has happened, and so God can't be here. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's a challenge when we face death, and when it's come to death, like everyone, like that's kind of like the ultimate test for us, how we can see God in this, because it seems like you said, like there's no God in here.
Right.
If God were here, my brother, my cousin, or my husband, my wife won't have to go through this. So, and I think it is not easy to accept. Even we have faith in God. Even Martha and Mary, those are close to Jesus and see all the miracles, but still, when we go through that, we all have the same level in faith. We still facing that and have the fear that not seeing them again.
I think I agree. The temptation in those moments is often to try to bypass the suffering and the loss by outthinking it. By discovering the right answer, and we can do this for ourselves. How can there be a God if I have lost this person? Even worse, we can try to do it for other people, explain away other people's suffering. Well, don't worry, God is there. All the ways that we silence other people's grief and suffering. But I think these are immensely personal, even existential moments where we're confronted with a situation that we can't outthink and outfeel. We have to be in it. And the decision to believe in God is no longer theoretical. I think it has to come from somewhere very deep, deeper than the intellect, or the wish to avoid suffering. And it can be a test. And everyone goes through that differently. And people who seem to come through it with faith sometimes don't actually have faith. They've bypassed it. Other people who seem to despair can actually be more willing to confront the actual reality at hand. So I think it can take people time to recover. Sometimes the faith that they had goes away, is discovered to not be sufficient to handle the depth and the loss. And that can be a good thing. That can allow something deeper slowly to emerge. We confront the gods that aren't real oftentimes, the gods that we expected to save us from these things. And we have to let go of those gods sometimes in favor of the God who actually is. But our only connection to the God who actually is life, is what's happening right now. Right. There's no other way around that.
And God's presence doesn't take away the workings of what it means to be mortal. I mean, we are said so many times we are vulnerable because we are flesh and blood, and which means that things happen to us. There is suffering that's a part of what it means to be human, and that suffering doesn't mean that God isn't there. It simply means that we are part of the human race, and we suffer because we are vulnerable. I think what's extraordinary about this story is that when it is not that Jesus wasn't there and therefore prevented it from happening, but that after it had happened, when the worst things happen to us, because we are human, because we do suffer, God often has another thought, and can bring it, like you said, to a leap of faith or something, can bring life from it. This human experience, which is suffering, in a way that we had not even imagined before, a way that Martha could not have imagined, because there's no way she's moving. She's not moving this stone, because this is completely out of God's hands at this moment.
And with that, I'm amazed by Jesus' faith in those around him. He's trying not to do this alone. He is willing to hold back and not rush off to heal Lazarus. And in a sense, it seems like he's hoping that they'll understand him. Eventually, he's placing his faith not only in God, which ostensibly is easier for him than it is for us, but he's putting his faith in humanity to be able to see these things and see the glory of God, which again comes back to why he must be so troubled, that he's working so hard to do these things and putting his reputation at risk. His whole life's work is at stake here. There's a lot of loss. There's a lot of risk.
Yeah, and I heard homilies on the moving the stone from the tomb, it's compared to our tomb inside. Yes, we profess it, we profess our faith, but are you willing to remove that stone? Martha, I profess that you are the life and resurrection, but don't move that stone, it's staying in there.
Right.
So it's like we believe, we trust, and we believe that God is mercy and love, but however we don't let God enter our heart and clear and clean or resurrected the fault or whatever inside of us, because we can understand.
Right.
Stay away from it. Don't touch it.
We do that sometimes. I think in prayer too. We believe that there are parts of our lives that even God shouldn't see because it stinks, because it's so corrupted or has been, secrets and things that we hold on to, and so we're slow even to let God remove the stone to come in and to bring it to life. So we pray, and I know people who pray, and sometimes I pray the same way, where you kind of keep things kind of closet in little pockets so that you don't want God to see it, which is kind of crazy because of course God already knows and sees all things, and you're
It's like He looking from the above into the house without roof, and we try to cover it. Knock on the door. Don't open that door, but He's like looking. Yeah.
One last thing. What do you think of the when Jesus says we're going to go to Bethany, and I think it's Thomas who says, "Let's go and die with him."
Yep.
What is he talking about?
I mean, I hear sarcasm and sort of an eye roll and a here we go again, boys.
Right.
We know that they hate us, and if we go back.
So is he going to die with Jesus or going to die with Lazarus?
Jesus, I think. Rabbi, the Jews are just trying to stone you, and you want to go back there.
Right, okay.
And Thomas says, okay.
Let's go die with him.
Let's go die with him.
How maybe like die with him is like with Lazarus, right? Let us all go die with him, like with Lazarus, because he not have that faith of raising Lazarus from the dead. So we go there and we die.
Right.
Together.
That's what's going to happen, right? That's right. Any other thing in the gospel?
I think that's good.
Yeah. And I think like to end it, I think one of the quote, the teacher is here and is asking for you. The teacher is here and is asking for you. So I think this last Sunday of Lent, we're acknowledging through all this Mass, the teacher is here and asking for each of us to either open that tomb or invite him into our stand or any messiness of our life. So
it is an appropriate reading for these times.
Yeah. We're stuck in the tomb. We're stuck at home. Someone needs to roll away the stone.
Right. And just the business of believing that the difficult moments in our lives don't have a last word. No matter the kind of suffering that it is, whether it's fear because of all that's going on, or loss of community as we are accustomed to it, that God has another thought, and that God's power over even these things for those who believe is great enough that we can be placed in a different but a better place when we move beyond these present sufferings. I read something recently, and they said that this gospel is kind of an invitation also for all of us to call our friends out of tombs. Because this guy is a close friend of Jesus, Lazarus, with his sisters, and one of the reasons why I read it the way that I did, maybe I'll read it later again, but is I used to, in my early days in priesthood, I would say, Lazarus, come out, whoa, because it says in a loud voice. But I now see it as his calling a friend from this place. Lazarus, come out, and Lazarus comes out. Maybe we'll have an opportunity today and other days to call a friend from the tomb.
Right, to end it, we're gonna end it with the collect of this week. Let us pray. By your help we beseech you, Lord our God. May we walk eagerly in that same charity with which, out of love for the world, your Son handed himself over to death. Through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever.
Amen.
Bow down for the blessing. Bless, O Lord, your people who long for the gift of your mercy, and grant that what at your prompting they desire, they may receive by your generous gift. Through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
And God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen.
I got a goosebump.
Goosebump? The prayer?
The prayer.